Shalom everyone, I hope you are well. This week's Parsha is Parashat Vayetzei, and in this Parsha we have the first mention in the Torah to the concept of gratitude. When Leah has her fourth son, Yehuda, she says, "Now, Oda es Hashem, I will give gratitude to God that I have my fourth son with Yaakov." And we know that the word Yehuda has become really the name for all Jews. We are called Yehudim, and the commentaries tell us at the very essence of who we are as Jews is our ability to give gratitude. So I'd like to talk a little bit about gratitude, and I think it's appropriate with yesterday being Thanksgiving. And as we know, Thanksgiving, according to the Torah, is not a one-day-a-year holiday, but is every single day of the year. We have a concept of Thanksgiving. We have a concept of giving thanks. We wake up in the morning, the first word we say out of our mouths in the morning is Modeh ani lefanecha. I give gratitude to Hashem. And even though in proper grammar it should be ani modah, but we say Modeh ani because the first word out of our mouth shouldn't be ani, shouldn't be I, but it should be rather modah, gratitude, the concept of gratitude. So I'd like to share with you all something personal that happened to my family 12 years ago. On the night before Thanksgiving, I received a phone call from my wife. I won't forget this, probably my whole life. But she calls me, it was about 6:50. I was walking out of the old Emet office, and she says, "Is your father okay?" And I instinctively said, "Why would he not be okay?" And she says, "My mother told me that there was an attack in India, and at the time my father was traveling to India quite a bit. So I sort of flippantly responded. I said, India is a big country. Even if there was an attack, and even if he was there, what's the likelihood that he was anywhere near this attack?" And about 10 minutes later, my mother called me and she said, "Abba's okay, your father's okay, he's on an airplane coming back home." And as it turned out, as many of you know, there was a coordinated, terrible attack in the city of Mumbai, India, where many different targets were hit, including, unfortunately, the Chabad house, where a very special couple, the Holzbergs, were brutally killed. In addition to that, there were two hotels that were hit, the Taj Mahal Hotel and the Ambria Hotel. And when my father stayed in India, he always stayed in the Ambria Hotel. And as it was, he was actually in the lobby of the Ambria Hotel a few minutes, 2-3 minutes before the gunman came in. And he was there wearing a yarmulke. And anyone who was upstairs in their room was basically okay. But those who were in the lobby, who looked remotely American or white, anything like that, were immediately killed. And one of the people he was there with had this feeling that he wanted to leave. And even though they didn't really need to leave the hotel for quite some time, and the Mumbai airport at that time at least wasn't really a great destination place, they left the hotel without even checking out of the hotel, got into their taxi, and my father actually believes that he saw the gunman walking in front of his taxi. There was these hooded people walking in front. Later he realized they were the gunmen. So he was literally within a minute, 2 minutes of, unfortunately, being right in the middle of a major terrorist attack. He got to the airport, and his flight was the last flight that came out. They left the airport before they shut down the airport. And the next night, we had Thanksgiving in our home, in my parents' home in Monsey, New York. We didn't celebrate Thanksgiving every year with a major feast, but starting from that year, we made it something called a Sudat Hodah, a celebration of Thanksgiving. And there's a very strong basis for this in the Torah. There's actually a chapter of Tehillim that we say every day called Mizmor LeTodah, a psalm of thanksgiving. That psalm was said when a person would bring a korban todah, a sacrifice of thanksgiving. When a person would bring this sacrifice of thanksgiving when they were saved from a danger, when they made it across the ocean. In those days that was very challenging. Someone who got out of jail, who was wrongfully in jail, somebody who made it out of a terrible illness. They would bring a korban todah, a sacrifice of thanksgiving, and they would bring their families together, and they would say this chapter of Tehillim, Mizmor LeTodah, a psalm of thanksgiving. And one of the interesting things about this korban, about the sacrifice, is that you had to bring many different types of bread and matzot, which actually caused you to bring a lot of your friends together and to celebrate together the fact that you were saved. And my family has now been doing this every year. We make a Sudat Todah, a celebration of Thanksgiving, that my father was saved from this danger. And when we think about the idea of gratitude, the Hebrew word for gratitude is, the word we use is called hakarat hatov. And people often translate this as being grateful. But I think if you actually look at the word, hakarat hatov means to recognize the good. Hakara is to recognize the good. And I believe what the message is something much more than just gratefulness. But rather, the concept of hakarat hatov is the idea of seeing the good even in the most difficult situations. Hakarat hatov, seeing the good through the difficulties. And I believe that that's really what Hashem is challenging us to do. And when a person is saved from a danger, when a person has a salvation, when something great happens to you, there's an opportunity to connect to that moment. There's an opportunity to appreciate the good in those moments. And I believe if a person is able to appreciate the good when Hashem is there for them, when they see Hashem being there for them, we know Hashem is always there for us, then they're able to deal with difficulties in life, even at times when we don't see Hashem's hand. I often refer to this as an attitude of gratitude, as a lifestyle that's built on appreciation. I encourage the Emet students when I speak about this topic, and I work on this myself, to try to be a connoisseur of appreciation. Like a person can be a connoisseur of wine, try to be a connoisseur of appreciation. To look for opportunities to appreciate. To walk outside when you thought it was going to be rainy and say, wow, it's beautiful today. To appreciate the smallest moments of our life. There's a very interesting Gemara. The Gemara tells us in Masechet Brachot that Kishem shevarchim al hatov keim mevarchim al hara, that we're supposed to make a bracha even on our difficult situations, even on things that look bad to us, because we know Hashem is always there for us. And the Gemara also tells us something very interesting as well. We know in the Birchat HaMazon, the fourth blessing of the Birchat HaMazon is called the blessing of Hatov v'Hametiv, the God who is good and does good. And this blessing, the Gemara in Brachot tells us, was instituted at a very interesting time in Jewish history. Now, before I saw this Gemara, before I saw this thing in this place in the Talmud, I would have thought that the fourth blessing of Birchat HaMazon, HaMelech HaTov v'Hametiv Lakol Shebecho Yom V'Yom Hu Heitiv Hu Meitiv Hu Yetiv Lanu, the God who is good and does good for us every moment of our life. I would have thought maybe this is a time in Jewish history when things were amazing, when it was Shlomo b'Malchuto, when we controlled the whole world, when everything was great. And yet the Gemara in Brachot tells us exactly the opposite, that the Bracha HaTov v'Hametiv was instituted after the city of Beitar, which was during the Bar Kokhba rebellion, was basically the end of the Bar Kokhba rebellion, when over 500,000 people were brutally killed by the Romans, and the Romans didn't even allow them to have a proper Jewish burial. But a few months later, when they came back to the city, the bodies were still intact, and they were able to give them a proper burial at that point. And they were able to feel that sense of gratitude that Hashem was there for them, that even in this most difficult moment, even this most challenging moment, Hashem was there and preserving the bodies so they could get a proper kivura, a proper burial. And this is not what I would think would be HaMelech HaTov v'Hametiv Lakol. But in essence, I think what it's teaching us is that if we become a connoisseur of appreciation, we'll be able to appreciate the good, even in the most difficult moments, even in these challenging moments. And it's interesting, when do we make a bracha on Hatov v'Hametiv, the bracha Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam Hatov v'Hametiv, the God who is good and does good? So one of the most common places that many have the custom to make it is if you have a wine on your table. Let's say you have a Chardonnay on your table, and somebody brings you a Merlot that you like better, a special Merlot from Israel, something that's very delicious that you really look forward to having. And they bring you a better bottle of wine. So you cannot make a Borei Pri Hagafen again, because you already made a Borei Pri Hagafen on the Chardonnay. But you can make a new bracha called the bracha Hatov v'Hametiv, the God who is good and does good. And I was thinking about this, how do we compare, how do we connect a Merlot to a Chardonnay, and the city of Beitar, where 500,000 people are killed, and they were able to give them a proper burial. And I think that the connection is that if we work on ourselves to appreciate the good in the good times, to appreciate the good, the subtle little moments of good, how today is a little better than yesterday, how this is working out well, to appreciate the small amounts of good, the hakarat hatov, to appreciate little bits of goodness, even in difficult moments, and to become a connoisseur of appreciation, then, God forbid, we'll be able to see good even in the most difficult moments that we should never have to see. I think having Thanksgiving in the middle of COVID is an opportunity to do exactly this. An opportunity to appreciate the good in our life in a way that maybe we never appreciated it before. One of the biggest challenges to giving gratitude is that we become accustomed to something, we become used to our situation, and immediately after something good happens to us, we appreciate it, and then we get used to it. How often do you see a person walking down the street holding their heart and saying, "I'm so happy today, I realized that my heart pumps more blood in one day than a small river," but nobody does that, right? Because they appreciate, or very rarely do people do that, because they just take it for granted. But when you see them running down the street with a new piece of technology that they got, and that they're appreciating more than their heart or their lungs or their ability to breathe, etc. So I think that during COVID, one of the positive parts, you could say, is that it helped us, or can help us, to appreciate things in a way that we never appreciated them before. And I think a Thanksgiving in the middle of COVID is an opportunity to appreciate the little moments around us and connect to all the blessings that we have in our life. Hopefully, we'll move past this very soon, and we'll be on the other side of COVID, and we'll be able to take off our masks and be able to connect with each other in ways that we look forward to doing. But while we're in this situation, while we're not able to do some of those things, let's look into ourselves and appreciate the blessings in our life in a way that maybe we never appreciated them before. And let's all become a little bit more of a connoisseur of appreciation. Connect to that moment. I believe every year we make the Sudat Hodah, but it doesn't just have to be a Sudat Hodah, a celebration of Thanksgiving. Each one of us can connect to those moments in our life when we saw something good happen to us, when our child who we thought was ill, we realized was fine, when something else happened, someone in our life that was saved from a difficult situation. When we connect to those moments, we're able to bring that gratitude into our lives in a special way, in a deeper way. And hopefully, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll all come together, celebrate together like we used to before, and even more than we did before, with true gratitude. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.